The Golden Arrow buses have suspended their operations in Nyanga after one of their vehicles was set alight earlier today. Reports suggest that a law enforcement vehicle was also attacked in Khayelitsha. Meanwhile, the City of Cape Town's traffic services have warned of road closures affecting the N2 inbound and outbound at Jakes Heuvel Drive. Motorists are being advised to seek alternative routes. We're joined now by the Western Cape Transport MEC, Ricardo Mackenzie. Ricardo, good evening to you. Thanks for your time. In the last hour, we've seen incredible scenes at the bus terminus in the Cape Town city centre, where thousands of people were still waiting for vehicles to come and take them home tonight. How are you, as the provincial department, responding to this problem?
Thank you, and good evening for having me. Thank you, Kathy. We have had engagements with Golden Arrow bus services, including PRASA, where they have made available additional buses to ensure everyone gets home this evening. In fact, my discussion with Mr. Mayor of Golden Arrow was he'll make sure that every passenger gets home this evening. So buses will be returning to town to make sure every passenger will go this evening. Obviously, because of the strike action or withdrawal of services by Santaco, there is a need for much higher service, which is what they're doing this evening.
The difficulty, based on what we saw earlier tonight, was that there was not only a shortage of vehicles, but there also seemed to be a reluctance to go to certain areas, namely Nyanga and Khayelitsha.
Yes, unfortunately, since the announcement of the withdrawal this afternoon by Santaco, as we've seen, unfortunately, many times in this country, whenever there is a strike, a bus or government vehicles bear the brunt. And we have seen this afternoon, as you've mentioned, the Golden Arrow bus, the traffic service, the ambulance, became victims of a strike action after the announcement by Santaco of their strike or withdrawal, as they call it.
So what does that mean tonight?
What does it mean tonight? It means individuals will take much longer to get home because the buses are being escorted by our traffic services to the respective communities and to places like Nyanga, where people will have to make transport arrangements to get from there because it is quite volatile. The services are on the scene there as we speak. All
right. So let me understand clearly what you're saying. There will be buses from the bus terminus in the CBD. Those buses will take residents where? And I'm talking now about the people specifically going to Nyanga and to Khayelitsha.
Those buses will take them to the areas of their normal routes, which will be escorted by the City of Cape Town Metro Services.
Okay, so when you say that people will have to make their own arrangements to get home because the situation is quite volatile, what do you mean by that?
What it normally means, if you, for example, in Nyanga or in Khayelitsha, and you would have taken a taxi, as you know, the taxi has withdrawn their services, so the internal routes where buses don't normally travel, that people have to make arrangements on their own.
So basically, you're dropping off everybody at what would be the entrance to Nyanga or the entrance to Khayelitsha, and beyond that, they have to figure themselves out?
Not necessarily. The service goes to where the buses normally drives on the roads, on the main roads in Khayelitsha. And what we do heard so far is that the normal internal routes, except the taxis, are not running. That is a bit difficult at the moment to get into.
So, MEC, so in terms of the layout of the land, because again, it is nighttime now, and many of these people will also have to try and be making their way home once it's dark outside. Now, when you as the MEC are saying it's too dangerous for buses which are being escorted by officials to be in that area, how much more for these residents that will be defenseless against potential criminality?
Well, that is unfortunately the dangers that the strike has brought about. The buses are going into those areas, so the normal routes, the last mile, the taxis would have taken. Obviously, the buses can't drive on those routes, and that is the last mile that we are extremely concerned about, and working with the city to try and help and get those people to get there. It is unfortunate, the strike that is withdrawal of services caused by Santaco, which we've asked them before not to participate in this. Since last week, we've been working with them not to withdraw their services, including a letter I've sent again today, including one on Monday. We've asked them to come back to the negotiation table because we don't want this to happen. We don't want commuters to be stuck without services.
So the problem that I'm really highlighting here, MEC, is that you're leaving residents basically in the hands of the elements, because if you as officials at such a high level are saying that there are no-go areas, even for your officials in an area like Khayelitsha or Nyanga, that means that those residents, once they get to where the bus will drop them off tonight, they are on their own. And the question I'm asking is that really an acceptable statement from an official in office like yourself?
No, Kathy, I think you misunderstood me. I said the buses are going in, but the last mile where they would normally have taken a taxi, for example, a bus can't go on a small road. That last mile they will have to walk. But the buses are being escorted by the city into those areas.
What is the presence of police in those areas tonight?
There is quite a high presence of police. We've seen it on our own WhatsApp group. There's an extremely high presence of police, metro and law enforcement traffic services in those areas.
Let's talk about the breakdown in these negotiations. Interesting, because you're saying that you had written to Santaco not to pull out of the negotiations, but you were aware then even from last week that the grounds on which you were negotiating were very shaky. If already last week you were writing letters asking them not to go on strike, and yet what we saw this week in as far as the effecting of the bylaws as it was described by the city officials did not indicate that there were other negotiations taking place, or even that there was anything that was negotiable.
The negotiations with the taxi task team was around the bylaws and ensuring that the minibus taxi industry don't pull out. Unfortunately, 2 or 3 other incidences happened, which was beyond our control, as you've seen the videos that took place on Tuesday afternoon, and that has caused the minibus taxi industry to go to their members who voted on the withdrawal of their services this morning.
What was beyond your control?
Beyond the control there was an incident that's widely played. I'm sure my colleagues in the city of Cape Town have spoke to it, about the taxi drivers and the gunshot that went off at the Cape Town station on Tuesday afternoon.
Yes, but let's talk about how that incident came about, because there is contestation here over the facts regarding that matter. The taxi operators say that they were the ones that were provoked by the officers who say that they were implementing bylaws. Now, one would imagine that if you are in a process of negotiations that is already, like I said earlier, on shaky ground, there would be clear communication about how to navigate or even manage the situation until there's resolution.
Yeah, we were in a meeting on Monday with the minibus taxi or the task team. Unfortunately, like in any negotiations, your laws don't stop. Laws don't get suspended because you're busy negotiating. So what the operational plan of the city continued on Tuesday, and as you say, there's contested versions of what happened, and that will have to be affected out in court over who was not the guilty party that fired that first shot on Tuesday.
Ultimately, you have taxi operators here that are bemoaning the fact that when there are bylaws that have been broken, the city wants to impound vehicles and not just deal with the driver that has committed that offense.
Kathy, the bylaws of the city and the NLTRA makes it very clear under what conditions a vehicle can be impounded. If I go to a restaurant and I get sick because of poisoned food, I can't blame the waiter. It is the owner of the restaurant that must take responsibility for that action. We all have a responsibility to obey the law. There are so many people, including 2 weeks ago Friday, I was at an impoundment where a vehicle had 16 people in that vehicle. It is not just the driver, it is the owner who allowed his vehicle to put 16 children. There was squalor transport in his vehicle. There has to be consequences for those actions.
The issue of liability is an interesting one because, of course, anybody can make the argument that they hire employees and they expect their employees to abide by the rules of the road. Now, we know that taxi operators aren't the ones driving these vehicles.
Yeah. It is their drivers driving the vehicle, and surely there's a responsibility to check that your driver who drives the vehicle have a public driver's permit, has a valid driver's license, does not have a criminal record. These are some basic things that you have to check before employing that driver. And the drivers that has been arrested driving these vehicles had warrants of arrest, one as much as I think 95 the other day, out on that particular driver. So the traffic officer had the duty to impound that vehicle. Because I don't want to drive in a vehicle with a driver with 95 warrants of arrest out on me. And that is the responsibility of an operator, to check the drivers they employ are bounded by the law, have a driver's license, have a public driving permit, and adhere to the conditions of a road. Surely any decent human being can't want to out-negotiate those basic things.
The way you make it sound, Mr. Mackenzie, is as if we're dealing with a highly sophisticated system. And yet we know that, by and large, how the taxi industry operates is on a very informal basis. I'm not saying that they shouldn't comply with the very valid rules of the road, but you talk about a warrant of arrest that have been issued. How are they supposed to know that their drivers have these warrants of arrest out?
Well, that is the most basic things, and that's what we're trying to regulate. A taxi owner of a vehicle, it is his vehicle. He's giving his vehicle to somebody that he trusts to make him or her money. Those are the basic things that surely they must check as taxi operators. Is this guy a wanted criminal taking my car that picks up children?
All right.
Thing that surely we must expect a taxi operator must know. They can't give their vehicles to anyone not knowing who they are, what they're doing, where they're from.
All right. Unfortunately, we're completely out of time.